Imagine you're crouched beside a fire, 50,000 years ago. The flames are dying. Smoke curls up into the dark, stinging your eyes, filling your lungs without asking permission. You don't think about it. You can't think about it. Fire is warmth. Fire is safety. Fire is the only thing standing between you and the cold things moving in the dark beyond the light. But somewhere in that smoke, something is happening to your body that you don't understand yet. Your breathing slows. Your mind feels strange, heavy, calm. You don't know it, but you've just done something that will eventually shape entire civilizations. When did humans go from accidentally breathing smoke to deliberately seeking it out? When did smoke stop being a survival hazard and become a habit? Long before humans were modern, before language, before art, before anything we'd recognize as culture, our ancestors were already living with fire. Every single night, for generation after generation, early humans sat inside caves and shelters with fires burning in enclosed spaces. No chimneys, no ventilation. Scientists who study ancient human remains have found something strange in fossilized lungs and bone tissue from early hominins. Signs of chronic smoke exposure, soot. These weren't smokers by choice. They were smokers by survival. Smoke isn't just smoke. Some plants, when burned, release mild psychoactive effects, a sense of calm, a change in mood. You sit by a certain fire and you feel different, lighter, calmer, maybe even something like relief. You don't know why. But you remember it. And memory, especially the memory of feeling good, is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. What happens if you seek that feeling out on purpose? Here's where most people assume the story starts with tobacco. It doesn't. Tobacco is actually a relatively late chapter in this story, and we'll get there. But long before tobacco existed in human culture, archaeologists have found evidence of something else entirely. Burned plant residues, charred seeds, specific organic compounds preserved in ancient hearths, found not where people were cooking food, but in separate, smaller fire pits. Fires that appear to have had no practical cooking purpose at all. Think about what that means. If a fire isn't for cooking, and it isn't for warmth in a space already warmed by a main fire, what is it for? Researchers studying these sites have found traces of psychoactive plant material, not large amounts, not enough to suggest large communal rituals, small, repeated traces, the kind of evidence you'd expect from individual, personal use. This is one of the strongest clues we have that early humans weren't just stumbling into smoke exposure anymore. They were starting fires specifically to create it. But why? This is where you have to stop thinking like a modern person with modern explanations and start thinking like someone living in a world without medicine, without science. If you're in pain, and smoke from a certain plant makes the pain feel smaller. If you're anxious about the dangers waiting outside your shelter, and smoke from a certain plant makes that fear quieter. If you're trying to communicate with the spirits you believe control the weather, the hunt, the harvest, life and death itself. And smoke seems to alter your state of mind in a way that feels like crossing into another world. Then smoke isn't just smoke anymore. It's medicine, it's communication, it's transformation. And once humans believed that, smoking didn't disappear. It evolved. Long before anyone smoked for pleasure, smoking appears to have started as something closer to religion. Across multiple ancient cultures, completely disconnected from each other by oceans and thousands of years, archaeologists have found nearly identical patterns. Specific plants, burned in specific ceremonial contexts, often associated with healers, shamans, or spiritual leaders, rather than ordinary daily life. This wasn't random. This was deliberate, structured, repeated behavior. In parts of ancient Africa, residue analysis on stone tools and hearths suggests certain plants were being burned specifically for inhalation, separate from cooking fires, dating back tens of thousands of years. In the Americas, long before European contact, indigenous cultures were cultivating and burning tobacco not as a casual habit, but as a sacred substance, something used to mark important moments, treaties, healing ceremonies, communication with ancestors. Smoking wasn't even primarily about the smoker's own experience. It was about transformation. The smoke itself was often believed to be a bridge. Smoke rises. It disappears into nothing. To early humans without any concept of physics or atmospheric science, that must have looked like something profound. Where does the smoke go? If you don't understand evaporation or air currents, the most logical explanation, the only explanation that makes emotional sense, is that it's going somewhere, to something, to someone. This single observation, smoke disappearing upward, may have shaped an enormous part of how ancient humans understood the relationship between this world and whatever they believed existed beyond it. So, before smoking was ever about addiction, before it was ever about pleasure, it was about reaching something humans couldn't otherwise touch. Because once you start deliberately seeking out a feeling, especially one connected to relief from pain, fear, or anxiety, you've created something incredibly dangerous. A loop. Early humans who repeatedly used smoke for its mood-altering effects would have, slowly, without understanding why, started to rely on it. Many of the plants ancient humans were burning contained compounds we now know to be habit-forming. Not in the modern, manufactured, chemically intensified way that cigarettes are today, but habit-forming nonetheless. The brain doesn't need to understand chemistry to become dependent on a substance. It only needs to repeatedly associate a behavior with relief. Smoke is no longer just for ceremonies. It's no longer just for healers and shamans. It has slowly, quietly, started slipping into daily life. A person in pain reaches for it. A person in grief reaches for it. A person simply trying to get through a hard day reaches for it. A behavior that started as accidental exposure, then became spiritual ritual, has now become something startlingly familiar. A coping mechanism. The earliest evidence of smoking as a regular, personal habit overlaps almost exactly with the earliest evidence of dependency-like behavior in human remains. We are talking about a connection between humans and smoke that didn't start with addiction. It evolved into addiction. Now, we arrive at the chapter most people expect from the very beginning: tobacco. But the real story isn't as simple as tobacco was discovered and everyone started smoking. Tobacco cultivation in the Americas dates back thousands of years. And from the very beginning, it wasn't treated like an ordinary plant. Indigenous cultures developed entire systems of meaning around it. Strict rules about who could use it, when, and why. In many of these cultures, tobacco wasn't an everyday indulgence. It was sacred, sometimes even restricted to elders, healers, or specific ceremonial moments. Smoking tobacco casually, the way modern humans do, would have seemed deeply strange, even disrespectful, to the people who first cultivated it. This is a massive twist that most people never learn. The casual, recreational, light one up because you're bored version of smoking that exists today is almost the opposite of how this practice began. So what changed? Contact, trade, colonization. When European explorers encountered tobacco use in the Americas, they didn't understand the deep ceremonial context behind it. They saw a plant that produced smoke that made people feel a certain way, and they brought it home, completely stripped of its original meaning. This is the exact moment where smoking stopped being primarily spiritual and became primarily personal. And once that shift happened, there was no putting it back.